tell you what, he is all over so many of the changes, whether it's lawsuits and everything else in between with the changes and the way things are in college football. Ross Dellenger, Yahoo Sports, joins us on 365 Sports. Ross with Craig and David Smoke and Paul Catalina. Ross, it was the latest story you had today. You've had so many of them. Do you, based on what you know, think that, and I had Pat Smith on and asked him with WJOX in Birmingham, we did, about no matter these options, do you think that the SEC and Sankey, Petiti and the Big Ten will go for any of it?
Unlikely. You know, they've been pretty public. Certainly Greg Sankey has, that he's against, and I wrote that, in the story. It was pretty clear, like he's against a lot of this private equity, a lot of the concepts, models from outsiders, and so. But I think what you may see happen here eventually is the concepts in these models, in these proposals, in the money tied to these proposals. It's going to be kind of a pressure point for the leagues to change, to do some changing, whether that's revenue, different ways to generate revenue, or different ways to distribute revenue. It's been talked about quite a bit with this SEC, around this SEC Big Ten meeting, but it's a scheduling arrangement, between the two conferences to get more big matchups that will produce more revenue. So that's what it's all about. These proposals, like the Super League proposals, they give everyone, including administrators, an idea of the money that's being left kind of out there, that's available if they make some changes. And I think we're getting closer and closer to administrators making these changes because now they have to pay athletes, right, directly. And so there is kind of a chase more than ever for more money.
Ross, Brandon Marcello said this. I was curious your opinion on this, that this, group coming to them and like giving them ideas is just going to give them the ideas on how they do all this, maybe without the private equity involved in it. If it's going to go to the Super League anyway, do you see them doing it on their own without getting all these other outside people involved?
Well, absolutely. And I think I wrote about that in that story. I have a quote from an SEC athletic director basically saying, we don't need a middleman. We don't need somebody else. And I think that's probably where we are. We're in a spot where I think a lot of these concepts that are proposed by the Super League can be done not just between the two leagues, SEC and Big Ten, but can be done between maybe the four leagues, Big 12 and ACC as well. Can the 70 presidents, I had somebody in the Big 12 actually tell me this, can the 70 presidents come together, right, and do this themselves? And the answer is probably yes. Now, will there be this amount of money, $9 billion in this over 10, 12 years? Maybe not, because everybody's kind of tied to these media contracts right now. But there will still be new money if you come together, work with the networks on this.
Ross, the SEC and Big Ten meeting, obviously this is the kind of thing that perhaps gets discussed in the hallways or even in the actual meeting rooms, but what kind of, I guess, is on your forefront in terms of what you're anticipating on hearing? I know it's not going to be anything necessarily earth-shattering, but what's of interest to you from the fact that they're meeting, and do you feel like others out there should be, I guess, concerned that they're taking the lead, or should that be, celebrated in some ways that somebody's trying to get this thing on the right track?
I don't think many people are celebrating it outside of the SEC and Big Ten. I don't think there's a whole lot of celebration. I do think there's a little bit of anxiety and fear, right, in why they're meeting. And I mean, look, this is historic. It's pretty much unprecedented for two major conference athletic directors to both kind of get together and like this in person. So I think there's probably three main things on the agenda, and I wrote it in that story today. Number one is the college football playoff format in the automatic qualifiers per league. I think there's a push from the SEC and Big Ten, specifically the Big Ten, to have multiple automatic qualifiers for the Big Ten in the SEC. You remember they proposed that in the spring. I think I might have even been on the show talking about that. Is they proposed 4 AQs for each the Big Ten and SEC, 2 AQs for each the ACC and Big 12. So that was proposed already. I think there's probably interest in doing that, and I think that will be discussed. The second thing on the agenda item, I think, is, as I mentioned earlier, it's a scheduling line between the two leagues to get the blue bloods, get their big programs to play more often, to generate more eyeballs and more money. And then I think the third thing on the agenda is the House settlement case, which of course was approved yesterday, and it needs a lot more answers right now. I think it needs there's a lot of post-settlement questions right now. And I think one of those post-settlement questions is the enforcement arm. What happens with the enforcement arm in the NCAA governance, how that looks? I think that will be discussed as well.
You mentioned the enforcement and even the overall, the fact that the judge finally said, okay, Judge Wilkins said, okay, let's get it through this first hurdle. How shaky was that they wouldn't have been able to get that? Because I know she scolded them and sent them back to the corner to get things done.
Yeah, she did. She scolded them a little bit about the booster enforcement, right? Cutting out the boosters, cutting out third-party NIL. And they had to clarify language around that, and they did that. They, as in the plaintiffs, lawyers, and the defendants as well, the NCAA and power leagues, they clarified language. They took out the booster part. They basically weakened a little bit the tone of the enforcement entity. I don't know that it's really going to change going forward, but they weakened the language a little bit, and that was enough for her, I guess, and she approved it. But the big question is how this is going to be structured, and it's expected to be structured where you have a clearinghouse that will clear all deals that boosters do with athletes, all NIL deals, and the clearinghouse will either approve those deals or not approve those deals. And that's what she had a problem with. And so they kind of weakened some of those language of what qualifies, who qualifies as a booster, basically what entities have to go through this clearinghouse. And that's what happened there. And I guess they did enough to get her approval.
Is there anybody outside of the Big Ten and the SEC, whether it's Yormark or Phillips, and he's got his own issues, that has the Ross, to just like play poker with either one of these conferences, or do they just have to take it and shut up?
Well, look, as far as when it comes to the CFP format, there was an agreement made in the spring that the SEC and Big Ten would have control over the format going forward outside of some guarantees. And the guarantees were each champion. You'd have five champions would get in. So you'd have 4 power conference champions and a best group of 5 would get in. And then you'd have some guarantees for Notre Dame. If they finish in the top 12, they're getting automatic at large, things like that. But outside of those guarantees, the SEC and Big Ten control the format. In the Big 12 and ACC and all the group of 5 went along with that and signed the CFP deal. So when it comes to CFP format, the ball is in the Big Ten and SEC's court. Now, when it comes to a lot of these other things, I think the Big Ten and SEC holds a lot of weight, but the Big 12 and the ACC certainly have enough big brands, especially basketball powers, that move the needle, that they can influence a lot of these other decisions, and they should.
So no matter how much it may seem that Greg Sankey wants to break completely away from all these people, he's not going to. I need assurance on this, Ross. He pulls some emperor moves sometimes, and it makes me nervous.
Yeah, he's certainly been fairly public lately with some comments, not so subtle comments, most of them directed at these super leagues. Until my story today, I don't know that people realized what his comments were directed at. Many probably thought they were directed at the College Sports Tomorrow 130 team Limperna kind of model. But I think it's pretty clear they've been directed at the private equity backed smash capital proposal, and he does not want to see outside entities come in. That said, I think there's a lot of concepts. Again, part of this proposal and part of these Super League proposals that the SEC and Big Ten, or the SEC, Big Ten, Big 12, and ACC can do themselves. And they're going to have to make that decision: is it 2 of them or is it 4 of them? And what does this look like going forward? But we're clearly heading toward a space where FBS is going to look a lot different, in competition is going to look a lot different among the FBS schools, and that means probably Big Ten and SEC schools, specifically those big brands in those leagues, probably not playing as many of the Group of 5 schools, probably not playing as many FCS. You're going to see kind of a move away from that, and you're probably going to see them talking more together, whether it's the Power 4 or the Power 2, whatever you want to call it, talking more together and competing against each other more.
Ross, last thing, and by the way, the article is Yahoo Sports with Ross Dellenger. While SEC Big Ten leaders mull major changes, new Super League concept looms that could radically alter sports. And every question we've had, you've heard Ross respond by saying it's in the article. It's a great article. It's lengthy, very detailed, and also looking at every scenario. But I love the one quote in here when they were talking about this. We don't need a middleman, the SEC school athletic director. I'd like to go see if we can figure out something ourselves, which is what you brought up. In the NFL, everybody makes the same amount of money. Now, other franchises, the Cowboys and others, seem like they print more money outside of the television part of it, where everybody makes the same per parity. Why is that so difficult with the college football playoff? The Cowboys are the richest franchise, but they're not guaranteed a playoff setup. Nobody is unless they win the division or they're a wild card. Why is that so hard for college football to get that?
Well, I think that in this specific case, the Big Ten and SEC want to scale up in their regular season, right? They want to play bigger matchups in the regular season. And bigger matchups oftentimes mean you obviously play better opponents and you potentially lose more games, right? So I think in order to play bigger matchups and tougher teams, I think there's a desire from those in the Big Ten especially, but in the SEC as well, to gain more automatic qualifiers so that you have a little bit of a safety net of, okay, if we play these games and maybe lose these games and lose 3 or 4 games, we're still guaranteed a certain amount of spots. So that's where it comes from. It's all connected. The scheduling and the CFP format, it's all kind of connected around this. We need to play bigger games. That way we can make more money and draw more eyeballs. And we need to be guaranteed that, if we lose 3 or 4 games, our third or second best team is going to still get in.
Yep. Ross, thank you, man. I know your phone blows up all the time. What you do is fantastic. We appreciate you when you give us time. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, guys.
Thank you. Ross Dellenger, Yahoo Sports, with us on 365 Sports.